define psychology as a field of study. Psychology is a scientific study of behavior and mental process. Psychology, like every other science, has a goal of learning how things work. A goal specifically aimed at understanding human and animal behaviors. These goals are descriptions, explanations, predictions, and controls. Description is what is happening. The first step in understanding anything is to observe it, noting everything about it, and describe it. Explanation is why it is happening. Finding explanations for behavior is important for forming theories of behavior. A theory is a general explanation of a set of observations or facts. Description provides the observation. Explanation helps to build a theory. Prediction is when will it happen. Determining what will happen in the future is a prediction. Studying the prediction is clear. Control. The purpose for the last of the 4 goals of psychology is to change or modify behavior, which is control. How can it be changed? The focus of control or the modification of some behavior is to change a behavior from an undesirable one to a desirable one. Not all psychological investigations will try to meet all 4 of these goals. In some cases, the main focus might...
I'm sorry, that was my bad.
I'm sorry, they moved it up, so let me try again. Might be a description and prediction, as it would be for a personality theorist who wants to know what people are like, which is description, and what they might do in certain situations, which is prediction. Although these goals have not really changed over the years, in the time since psychology's beginnings, the methods achieving them certainly have changed. For example, you try. Which goal of psychology is this? Rusty has created a training program to help parents learn how to use car safety devices for their children. That one is control. The second one is Willard is observing a 4th grade classroom and is taking notes about their prejudice and discrimination. Which goal is that? Description. Ariel has created a standardized test for her fashion program. She believes the students who perform well on this test will succeed in their fashion program. Which goal is this? It's prediction. Ren is conducting interviews to describe why students have chosen psychology as their major. Which description is this? Explanation.
When your conscience developed after 6, that was the superego. He believed that your personality was formed by your first 6 years of life. John Watson was the founder of behaviorism, and that's focused on observable behavior. He's best known for his Little Albert experiment, where he conditioned a child named Little Albert to be afraid of a white rat by using a loud noise to frighten the kid. When Mary Carver Jones repeated that experiment, she used a white rabbit and a child named Little Peter. She proved that she could duplicate Watson's experiment with Little Albert, and then she could counter-condition Little Peter not to be afraid. Chapter 1, Section 1.5 is about the differences between a psychologist, a psychiatrist, and a psychiatric social worker. A psychologist is defined as a person who does not have medical training but does have a doctorate degree like a PhD or an EDD. A psychiatrist has a medical degree like an M or a DO and is a medical doctor who specializes in the diagnosis and...
Why is psychology considered a science? And what are the steps in using the scientific method? The scientific method is a way to determine facts and consider the possibility of error and bias when observing behavior. The 5 steps are perceiving the question. You notice something interesting happening in your surroundings for which you would like to have an explanation. Once you have a question, you want an answer. The next logical step is to form a tentative answer or explanation for the behavior you have seen. This tentative explanation is known as a hypothesis. Forming a hypothesis based on your surroundings, you form an educated guess about the explanation of your observations. Putting it into the form of a statement that can be tested in some way. Testing the hypothesis is the method you use to test your hypothesis will depend on exactly what kind of answer you think you might get. You could make more detailed observations or do a survey in which you would ask a large number of people questions, or you might design an experiment in which you would deliberately change one thing to see if it causes change in the behavior you are observing. Drawing conclusions. Once you know the result of your hypothesis is tested, you will find that either your hypothesis was supported, which means your experiment worked, and that you measured your
How are naturalistic and laboratory settings used to describe behavior, and what are some of the advantages and disadvantages associated with these settings? Naturalistic observations involve watching animals or people in their environment, but have the disadvantage of lack of control. Laboratory observations involve watching animals or people in artificial but controlled situations such as the laboratory. Observer effect is the tendency of people or animals to behave differently from normally when they know they're being observed. Participant observation is a naturalistic observation in which the observer becomes a participant in the group being observed.
Chapter 1, Section 1.8 is about how case surveys differ from case studies. A case study involves one person, like in the case of a rape, and the person is usually aware they're being observed, which can create some bias. As for case surveys,
Thank you, Laura. Now I'm going to talk about correlation coefficients. Correlation is a statistical technique that researchers used to discover and predict relationships between variables of interest. Like a researcher was given two correlation coefficients, he would pick the farthest one away from zero, positive or negative, to get the strongest coefficient. If he wants the weakest, he would pick the coefficient closest to zero. So the only method that will allow researchers to determine the cause of a behavior is the experiment. In an experiment, you need an independent and a dependent variable. An independent variable is what can change in an experiment, like non-caffeinated drink students compared to caffeinated drink students, and it is also known as the experimental group. A dependent variable is the variable measured from the experimenter point of view of the experiment, like memory questions he asked the students in the experiment. Finally, the control group is the variable that does not change in the experiment, like non-caffeinated drink students. Now Haley is going to talk about the two blind studies.
How do the placebo and experimenter effects cause problems in an experiment, and how can single-blind and double-blind studies control for these effects? Experiments in which the subjects do not know if they are in the experiment or control groups are single-blind studies. Experiments in which neither the experimenter nor the subjects know who is in which group is called double-blind studies.